I'm going to talk a little bit more about Grandier's trial in a moment, but what's interesting is that the possessions did not stop, the possessions or the exorcisms did not end with Grandier's death. And between 1634 and 1637, the nunnery drew visitors from all over Europe to come and witness these exorcisms. Visitors to the abbey would participate in what was somewhat of a spectacle. The beholder, the witness, was led from room to room, sometimes by one of the priests, and sometimes by the sounds of the possessed who were screaming or in their state of possession, to witness both the body of the possessed as well as the event of her exorcism. And this is what's described in Killigrew's letter. Jean des Anges, one of the principal Ursuline nuns who was possessed, traveled around France herself to display the curious physical sign that she thought was proof of her successful exorcism and healing. So when the initial exorcism took place, the name Joseph was miraculously etched on her left hand, which also is described in the Killigrew letter. For various reasons, including both fame and fortune, the public exorcisms continued at the abbey until 1637, which was at that point 3 years after Grandier's death. So we can think about this case in relation to a number of larger themes that we have talked about in this class so far. And one of those themes is in relation to evidence and proof that was used in the witchcraft trials, more broadly speaking. So in Grandier's case, the court had to still prove that he was guilty by the standard of proof that was in place. So how did they do that? What did they use as evidence and proof that he was indeed a witch? So as I'd mentioned earlier, Grandier had a reputation, and as we know, reputations were important forms of proof to establish someone's guilt at this time. And Grandier's reputation did not help him at all, as he was known for being, well, something of a player, and rumors had circulated about his various sexual encounters. And these rumors came back to haunt him during his trial. This sullied reputation made the depositions given by the various women all the more believable, and also made some of the men involved in the case more eager to find him guilty. Of course, the assessment of various priests and doctors who had examined the possessed nuns were used. They were called as witnesses against him. If they were legitimately possessed and claimed that Grandier was the witch who had caused their possession, then this claim must be true. So if the nuns were found by the various authorities to be actually possessed by demons, for whatever reasons, whether that's true or not, for the various reasons they were said to be actually possessed, then there has to be a cause. They need to find the reason for that possession, and Grandier was the one who would take the blame for this. And the nuns themselves were used as primary witnesses against Grandier. And this is perhaps one of the more interesting parts of the trial, because the nuns gave their testimony against Grandier while they were in a state of possession. So the nuns were thought to be speaking in the voice of the demon that was inside of them, and not with their own voice. So it's the demon himself who accuses Grandier and not the nun. After the exorcism had been performed, the nun claims to have forgotten everything that she had said, including the evidence given against Grandier. So therefore we can, to a certain extent, say that it is the demon who testifies against Grandier, and who they thought to speak the truth about Grandier's guilt. So obviously, within an early modern worldview, there's a slight problem with this. How can we say that the devil speaks the truth, that we can trust him? Prosecutors and priests got around this sticky theological and legal problem by claiming that the priest had power over the demon while he was performing the exorcism, and that the demon could not lie because of the priest's power. Therefore, the testimony of the possessed nun was deemed admissible against Grandier. Even after many of the nuns at a later time recanted their testimonies to try to overturn Grandier's death sentence, and they claimed that their accusations had been false. However, the priests on the other side said that it was simply the demon within them who was trying to recant the testimony and not the nun herself. So one could make all kinds of claims through appealing to demon possession, and we can see how the legal and theological authorities could manipulate this to get the result that they had wanted. So in addition to the various witnesses and the reputation of Grandier that was used against him, his home was also searched, and questionable materials were discovered that were used as evidence, including a pamphlet that he had written about the issue of ecclesiastical marriage, which I already mentioned about how he supported the marriage of priests. So this was evidence that was considered to be seditious and dangerous reading material as well as written material, and this was used against him. And this is a little bit different than some of the other witchcraft trials that we've seen, and perhaps gendered in a particularly male way, that the dangerous reading and writing material would be used as evidence. Prosecutors also claimed to have a copy, an actual copy, of the pact that Grandier had signed, offering himself to the devil. And I'm going to show you a copy of that here. Yeah. While possessed, one of the nuns was said to have literally thrown up Grandier's pact with the devil, which was supplied to the prosecution and used as evidences against him. So this is what you see here in the slide is the literal pact with the devil, said to be signed not only by the priest himself, but also by the devil and various other demons. What's interesting is that this is a written document that's signed with a name, compared to, say, other ideas that we've examined about the demonic pact, which was more of an act, a sexual act, and a verbal agreement, rather than a literal contract or written contract. So again, we can start to see some of the gender differences. However, the physical was still an important part of the evidence gathered against Grandier, and his body was searched for signs that he had indeed made this pact with the devil. In her possessed state, Jeanne des Anges claimed that Grandier had a scar on his body where he had cut himself to sign the witch's pact with blood. And of course, his entire body was searched for suspicious marks, and the physicians who searched him claimed that they found marks on his shoulders and around his genitals, which was common, and that these were areas that were obviously kind of marked with the devil's mark, and they were also impervious to pain. So this was used against him as well. After his body was searched, the court found that they had established enough credible evidence against him. However, he had not yet confessed to his crimes, which, of course, as we know from past lectures, that this was one of the key things that they needed to have in the trials was a confession. And this was also key in validating the actions that the prosecutors had taken against him. So in order to gain his confession, Grandier was tortured by a method called the boot, which consisted in driving a series of increasingly large wedges between the boards within which the legs are enclosed until his bones break. Grandier's lack of tears during his questioning and torture was taken as a sign of his guilt. And although he never confessed ever, even during his torture, and he did not name any accomplices, he maintained his innocence throughout his trial. And despite the shoddy evidence and a lack of confession, Grandier was found guilty on all counts against him. On August 18, 1634, the Royal Commission headed by Richelieu pronounced his sentence that he would be burned alive at the stake. Here's the verdict against him. We have ordered and do order the said Urbain Grandier, duly tried and convicted of the crime of magic, maleficia, and of causing demoniacal possession of several Ursuline nuns of the town of Loudun, as well as other secular women, together with our other charges and crimes resulting therefrom. For atonement of which we have condemned and do condemn the said Grandier to make amende honorable, his head bare, a rope round his neck, holding in his hand a burning taper weighing 2 pounds, before the principal door of the church of Saint Pierre du Marché, and before that of Saint Ursula of this town, there on his knees to ask pardon of God, the King, and the law. This done, he is to be taken to the public square of Saint Croix, and fastened to a stake on a scaffold, which shall be erected on the said place for this purpose, and there to be burned alive, and his ashes scattered to the wind. And this is an event that was depicted in popular pamphlets that were circulated to tell the story of Urbain Grandier. This is, you can see here is his name, Urbain Grandier, in a pamphlet from 1634. So this leads me to the final point that I want to talk about in the lecture today, and that is the more overtly theatrical and performative nature of the early modern demon possessions and exorcisms. I've already talked a little bit about the personal and politics that infuse many witchcraft accusations in the case of Father Grandier. However, demon possession and exorcism were political in and of themselves because of the confessional nature of exorcisms at this time. Protestants believe that the performative and dramatic elements of exorcisms betrayed them as false and merely staged theatrical performances to win converts. As you saw in the letter written by Thomas Killigrew, he describes the exorcism scene with a certain amount of skepticism, specifically because they were Catholic exorcisms. Sorry, the slide is back here. The priest then commanded him, or the demon-possessed nun, to tell him his thought. But the stubborn devil would not, but fell into imprecations and curses against the Church of Rome, cursing the head of it, who is the Pope, and the power they had over him, praying for Calvin and his sect, who were specifically Protestants, the Calvinists. They would not, nor could not hurt. So you can see, even just within what the nun says in her state of possession, that she's afraid of the power of the Catholic Church and hopes that everyone continues to believe in the Protestants by mentioning Calvin and his sect. So it's been intricately wrapped up in the confessional politics of the time. During the exorcism itself, the possessed nun spoke about the authority of the Catholic Church and the powerlessness of the Protestants over the devil. Only a representative of the Catholic faith had the power over the demon and to be able to perform a successful exorcism. Catholic implements were used in every exorcism, which I've mentioned, in the use of relics or beads and crosses. And the priest would often use the sign of the cross over certain parts of the body that were afflicted, and claim that it was through the power of the Catholic Church that they were able to perform the exorcism.